had a lot of thinking this week. I also had an injury, so I'm very aware of what it means to practice with the body not being in the same health that I take for granted. But I want to say that I'm feeling a lot of excitement about this time. Having lived through the civil rights struggles of the 60s, the women's liberation struggles, having lived through a number of struggles for human rights, for the dignity of all peoples, all beings, I feel that we're in what I would want to call a hinge moment. And I like to think, most of us have heard the quote from Martin Luther King that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. And that's the moment that I feel we're in. It feels as if, just as we see a rainbow sometimes, and we can almost see it reaching down toward the ground, I feel that we're in such a moment. We can feel or see or notice that this is a time that our peoples are coming together. Unlike some of the movements that I was in the 60s, we're not only affirming peace, we're affirming our whole family, our same gender loving, our non-binary, third gender, two-spirit kinfolk. We know in this moment that it's all of us or none, that we all walk through the doors of liberation together. In this moment, when Black lives matter, and when so many of us are examining the anti-Black racism that can exist even among people of color, when we're looking at colorism that exists in the Black community, in the Asian community, in the Latinx community, in the Native American community, this is a time to recognize, this is a time that we are called to allow, to investigate, and not to identify with all the barriers that have been placed in front of us, with all the ways that capitalism, colonialism, racism, homophobia, ageism, and classism asked us to be divided. This is a moment. This is a big moment. And for some of us, it's really important to be in the streets. And for some of us, I'm 71, African American, living with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. I am not ready to go out in crowds. And yet I know that I too have a role to play in this moment. Some of us have disabilities that make it not the wisest thing to exert the body. We are still part of this movement that is asking us to go forward. And paradoxically, we are also asked to move into a moment in which we care for the self and the body. The movements that I was in, the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, so many of the movements that I was in for social justice demanded that we work ourselves to the bone. There was no rest for the weary. We gave and gave and gave as if we were given from an inexhaustible fountain. And yes, there is a fountain of inexhaustible love. There is a fountain from which we can reach in and give. But many of us have not been taught how to access it. And we give to the point that we burn out. If we're lucky, we burn out in a way that is not permanent, that does not lay us up for 6 months. But for so many of us, who were in the trenches. We died prematurely. And as people of color, we know trauma. We know intergenerational abuse. We know what it is like to be abused by those outside of our communities and those inside of our communities. We also know our resilience. I want to quote, I brought a lot of quotes tonight. I want to quote Janice Mirikitani, who was at one point the poet laureate of San Francisco, working hand in hand to establish the programs at Glide. We talk about the beatings, your names of less thanness, the invisible places you've dwelled without voice or shelter. We gather where concrete walls meet sidewalks and shattered bottles. With the tools of our imagination, we chisel walls open, plant fields of new seeds, crops of new names. You are cactus flower growing in parched earth. You are morning glories blooming in the drought of profanity. We are seeds. We have been planted in stony ground, in fertile ground. We have been planted in the cracks of sidewalks, and we are rising. We are arising, we are rising, and we are waking up. Angela Davis says, I think the notion of what counts as radical have changed over time. Self-care, healing, attention to the body and the spiritual dimension, all of this is now a part of radical social justice struggles. That wasn't the case before. And I think that now we're thinking deeply about the connection between interior life and what happens in the social world. If we are going to go out and heal, if we are going to go out and mobilize, if we are going to go out and teach and love and serve and gather together, if we are going to plant seeds, love, nurture, make change, and transform, at least some of the time, we have to do it from a well that is full. And it's not always easy to fill the well. You know, as people of color, so much is moving against us. And yet, so much is coming toward us. Let's take a moment and just place our hands over our hearts. Feel the rhythm of your heartbeat. It has been with you since before you exited your mother's womb. And whether you were carried in love or fear, whether you were hated as a child, whether you were nurtured and loved, your heartbeat connects you not only to your human life, but the life of the planet. Your heartbeat connects you to all that lives and moves and swims and grows. Close your eyes for a minute and imagine that you are placing your hands on the bark of a tree. Breathe against the tree. Allow yourself to notice that the tree produces oxygen, that you exhale carbon dioxide, and imagine for a moment that your feet are rooted in the soil of the earth. Imagine that you were permitted to plant your feet in soft, squishy mud. Now, I know some of us were not permitted this, but just imagine. And imagine that your arms are embracing a tree and your feet are rooting deep into the soil of the earth. Imagine that you and the tree share one life, share one breath, and it goes from you, from the heart of your lungs to the heart of the tree. And it comes from the heart of the tree to the heart of your lungs. Just imagine. Rest in the awareness of the lungs of the planet that are breathing to you, that you are breathing out to. And acknowledge the interbeingness of our life with the life of the trees. Imagine your connection to the plants in your house, the grass outside of your house. Imagine your connection to the trees that grow on your street. They may be only every 5 blocks, but even along MacArthur Boulevard, in the heart of the inner city, there are trees. Feel your connection to the life of plants. And maybe imagining that your forehead touches the bark of a tree, that your hands touch the bark, the rough bark, the smooth bark of the plant that you know and love the best. Just let yourself bow to treeness, to the plant people. And imagine that the plant people love you and that they are sending to you their allyship. Our ancestors made allyship, made allies of the plants. They went into the forest crying for help. And all the medicine plants we have are the plants that heard our cries. Think the plant people were their medicine. All the Western pharmacopoeia that we know is derived ultimately from the plants. And opening your hands, draw in the medicine of the plant world and blow out gently your breath and the gratitude of your heart for those that help us survive. And let's open our eyes. We are not alone in this universe. We are loved. We are part of this universe, and we are loved. Breathe that in. And now, because tonight is in part about healing, let's imagine that we were standing in front of a body of water. It can be the ocean, and if the ocean is a little too big and scary, and it is for some of us, we can imagine a small pool, a pool big enough to put our feet in, a pool maybe big enough to lie our body in, and just feel water, cool water, warm water, the fluidity of water. And let's take our hands and imagine that we're dipping it in water and let it trickle over our face. Let's imagine that we're taking water and washing the scales from off of our eyes. Let's imagine that we're taking water and taking it over our hair, letting it fall, warm water, over the heaviness of our shoulders. Warm water over our shoulders. Cool water over our forehead and heart. Let's imagine that we're taking water, the water that flows from mountain streams, the waters, the sacred waters, the waters of the Ocean River, the waters of the Ganges, the waters of the streams that your people knew and loved. The waters of the Amazon, the waters of the rivers of China, the waters that flow in Peru, the streams, the oceans, named and unnamed, the tributaries, the waters of every continent. Every ancient human settlement was built close to a body of water. Our bodies are in alignment with water. Our bodies are 70% water. Our planet is the planet of water. Our blood flows following the moon, which regulates the water. Imagine that you are bathing your feet in water. In so many spiritual traditions, as a mark of honor, we bathe the feet of our sages and our elders in water. Imagine that your feet are being bathed in water. Imagine that in a time of trauma, you go to the ocean for healing, that you run your hands under cool water to cool the heatedness of your blood, to lessen the rage that arises. Water. Let's bow to the waters of the world, the living waters that make life possible. And let's make a commitment that we stand in alliance with the cleansing and the healing and the protection of the waters. Without water, there can be no life. So let's stand in protection of the waters. In talking about tonight's talk, I said that we would also talk about Buddhism and healing and what some of the beliefs in Buddhism are that are useful right now. Of course, I brought more quotes and more thoughts that I can possibly share with us. But I want to say that, the Buddha taught suffering, the first noble truth, that life was suffering, that birthing, the dying, the death, lamentation, and grief were all dukkha, craving, suffering. And yet as human beings, how can we not suffer when those we love die? How can we not grieve? All around us in the last months, we have watched a wave of death that is moving through the world. Some of it is the death due to illness, disease, virus, plagues. They have always been with human beings. Some of it, The deaths are the deaths due to injustice. And they too have been with us as human beings for so many years. Flaming poetry says, we survived the fires of Selma and Nagasaki, and we will survive Palestine. We survived Vietnam and Wounded Knee, Rwanda and Mississippi. We survived middle school and self-inflicted scars, losing our mothers to our fathers' hands. We survived slavery and genocide and coming back from the dead. We survived Stonewall and Soweto, the embargo and the ghetto, the Congolese beating, the screams and their echoes, the cutbacks and evictions, the droughts and the prison, Jim Crow and gas chambers, germ warfare and lynching. But we're going to break through. We're here right now. Think of all the demons that tried to take you, and you still survived. We will survive. And Maha Ghosananda says, we Buddhists must find the courage to leave our temples and enter the temples of the human experience, the temples that are filled with suffering. If we listen to the Buddha, Christ, Gandhi, we can do nothing less. The refugee camps, the prisons, the ghettos, and the battlefields, they become our temples. We have so much work to do. Kinfolk, we are called to take action, and we are called to rest. We are called to take action to mitigate and end suffering. And we are called to love and heal our bodies. And it seems sometimes that we cannot do both. And guilt arises. Shame arises. In this moment, I ask that you forgive yourself for all that you have not done. In every moment, you have a choice. And sometimes the choice you make is good for the body. And sometimes the choice you make is good for the soul. And sometimes the choice you make is good for the small self. And sometimes the choice you make is good for the whole. This is life. We are here to move forward in loving kindness. We are here to claim compassion. We are here to take joy in the actions of those who are our compañeros and compañeras. We are here to move forward. We are here to hold balance. We are here to choose the good and to forgive ourselves when we choose the not so good. We are here to recognize pettiness arises, anger arises, short-sightedness arises, cruelty, harsh speech arises. As we practice, we get better and better at letting things arise and not speaking that harsh word, not taking that unwholesome action. We get better and better and better in understanding that when we choose the wholesome and the good, that what flowers is good and wholesome. And that flowering feeds our heart, expands our consciousness, lays down a path that can be followed by others. Kinfolk, we are pathfinders. Kinfolk, we are way showers. Kinfolk, we are bringing together warring nations and communities. We are holding paradox. We are holding hereditary enemies. We are blending warring peoples in one body, one lineage. We are here to make a path that holds all the peoples, all the species, all the whole. We are here to serve the good. And the way is not easy. We must cherish this human form. For some of us, healing is about the body. It is about walking meditation. It is about Qigong and Tai Chi and making mindful movement with the body. For others of us, healing is about the mind, turning toward the suttas, studying what is good. For some of us, healing is in the loving kindness of our hearts and what we offer to our family. Sometimes that is what we do, that the world is very small, but that love that we offer, that comes back to us 1,000,000-fold. Yes, that is how we heal. For some of us, we need to rest deeply because of the trauma. For some of us, we need therapy. We need medication. We need to take in awareness of what has been done to our body and soul before we can go out. No shame in that. We do what we need to do to live and be whole. This is a moment. It is a profound moment. That arc, that rainbow bridge, where we are seeing the world that we want to live in. Kinfolk, it may not manifest in our lifetime, but we are laying the groundwork. We are laying the foundation. Just as Martin said, I may not get there with you. We are here. It is a moment. All of us need to come together. Know what is moving in your heart. Know where the work needs to be done. Know where the healing needs to be done. Let 1,000 flowers bloom. There's an old spiritual that says there are 12 gates to the city. That can be, if you're into astrology, all the signs. If Spirit wanted us to all be alike, that's how we would have been made. If Spirit wanted us to only cling to one people, that's how we would have been made. All of our people have always made king of the stranger, made relative of the refugees. We are here to serve the good. And as the Dalai Lama says, my religion is kindness. Let us go back to the basics. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I had wanted us to go into small groups to talk. But somehow that is not what has happened. However, I want to say that let's have some room, maybe 5 minutes of sharing, of commentary. What is moving in your heart? If the next Buddha is the Sangha, what can you share from your experience, from your practice to our Sangha? Thank you. And what I want to add is that while your physical umbilical cord connects you to the woman who bore you, your spiritual umbilical cord connects you to the divine feminine, to the divine masculine, the divine third gendered, all gendered, non-gendered being. Your psychic umbilical cord connects you to all the spiritual lineages, and those will always love you, always comfort you, always hold you. You are the child of spirit, always. Thank you for your comment in this moment when we were acknowledging that Black Lives Matter. And I made a list today of all the genocides that, a number of the genocides, the Trail of Tears, the killing fields of Cambodia, the massacres and killings of Romani people, the Nanking massacre in China by the Japanese, the killing of Haitians by peoples of the Dominican Republic, the deaths in the partition of India, the caste system of India. Crimes against humanity have happened to all our people. And I want to include white, Euro-Americans, Europeans in this. They did not escape it either. Crime, war, hatred, delusion, ignorance, greed has affected every people on the earth. Some of my African ancestors sold other African ancestors. There is nothing that any of us need to be ashamed of. All of us have ancestors who did bad things. All of us have ancestors who, at the risk of their lives, sheltered the other. All of us have suffered. There is a common humanity. Our suffering should link us. And in every era, in a particular time and place, there are particular injustices. There is a great crime that was done to African American people brought to the Americas, and before we came, there was a great, great genocide against the Native and the Indigenous peoples. So no shame. Your peoples, whoever they are, have suffered war and genocide and crimes against humanity. No shame. Just more awareness, more openness. Kintok. I believe that your mother would be proud of you. That our anger is a reminder of what is wrong with the society. When we act solely in anger, we sometimes, most often, do not see clearly. And we can do harm in a situation that harm may not or the blanket harm that we cause may not be the wisest choice. And we are not born wise. The Buddha did not become awakened in his first lifetime or his second lifetime or his 100th lifetime. Forgive yourself. Let your anger point the way to the things that are wrong. Recognize, allow, investigate, and do not identify with it. And forgive yourself. We are all, I am not an enlightened person. If there is someone in this Sangha who is currently enlightened, please let them speak. We are here to practice. We are all going to do things that we will regret. But as we practice more and more and more, what is not needed begins to fall away. Trust and practice. Before we dedicate the merit, I want to just do two quotes. And one is from Gloria Anzaldúa. And I did have someone practice pronunciation, but I apologize to all the native Spanish speakers. And she's talking about the contradictions. And these are the kinds of times we're in. We are the porous rock in the stone metate, squatting on the ground. We are the rolling pin, el maíz y agua, the masa harina. We are the comal, sizzling hot, the hot tortilla, the hungry mouth. We are the coarse rock. We are the grinding motion, the mixed potion. We are the pestle, the camino. We are the chili colorado, the green shoot that cracks the rock. We will abide. We are the ground. We are what is arising. We are what is being born. We are what is dying. We are what is transforming. We are what is weak. We are what is strong. Every day, in every moment, all those arise in us. And what Audre Lorde says, and when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering that we were never meant to survive. And because it is also Pride Month, something that we don't always hear from Audre. I have always wanted to be both man and woman, to incorporate the strongest and richest part of my mother and father within into me, to share the valleys and mountains upon my body the way the earth does in hills and peaks. I have felt the age-old triangle of mother, father, and child with the eye at its eternal core, elongate, flatten out into the elegantly strong triad of grandmother, mother, daughter, with the eye moving back and forth, flowing either or both directions as needed. Writing at a time that two-spirit, third gender, non-binary was not as well known, but speaking again to the fact that we cannot be squished into these identities that do not allow us to be fully all we are. So let's take a breath together. We dedicate the merit of all that has been shared, all of our practice, all that is said and unsaid, named and unnamed, known and unknown. We dedicate the merit of the practice to all beings who are suffering, to all beings in need of liberation, to all beings who will be this lifetime or next lifetime on the road of peace. May all beings be free of suffering. May all beings be liberated. May all beings be at peace. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sangha.